welcome. I'm with Jürgen Thurner from Experts for Excellence. Jürgen, thanks for joining me, and thanks so much for taking part in this recent What's the Scoop, where we're looking at 2022 trends. It's been really fascinating to read what's come in, and there have been some consistent ones and some that have come out of left field. So I wanted to look at your three main takeaways. The first one is kind of the standout one that everybody's talking about, and that's supply chain shortages. How do you see that going in 2022? More of the same?
No, I think economies and industries will recover from that shortage because demand is up and producers of especially electronic components, they come back to their regular capacities, which they have sized down in a way when Corona started. Meanwhile, they understand Corona should not be a blocker anymore. So they are scaling up again in terms of their capacity. So I would expect materials coming back in sufficient sizes to the markets. However, the problem that I see is that a lot of OEMs or EMS companies consuming that material, may that be raw material, may that be electronic components, they have started building up safety stocks. So they have placed probably more orders than they would actually need, even if the demand is back and even if the demand is rising in 2022. But what will happen is that the producers of components, they will have an overproduction. And then the OEMs, once they have sufficient material in their facilities back again, they would slow down and they would not pull any options they have placed in 2021, which then in the long term would lead to a bullwhip effect. So the suppliers going back to downscaling their capacities, then the demand goes up again, and then the supply will go up again, and this will create a bullwhip effect. That's what I fear.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree with you there. I think there's a second dynamic happening in the supply chain, and that's the freight and logistics side. Yes. And we see many challenges there. I interviewed Don Ackery of TTI recently, and he said almost every day he's asked by someone to get a helicopter out to a container ship and get their container off. And he has to constantly explain that can't really happen. Do you see that logistics settling and fixing itself? Because I think that's a concern to a lot of people. They're paying 3, 4, 5x for their container costs, and stuff's just not getting there on time. It's not getting offloaded. It's not getting onto enough trucks.
I think that will remain a problem in 2022. And I mean, the case that we have seen in the Suez Canal with the one ship that was blocking the canal, that shows that how fragile this whole system is. As soon as the slightest thing happens, then the whole system gets into trouble. And since the amounts of components that need to be shipped to fulfill the demand is still high and probably even increasing to cover the consumption, that will still be a problem in 2022.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right there. Let's come on to your second one, because I think it's interesting how these things all wrap together. Sustainability, the strive for climate neutrality. What you've interestingly done is set that against the German Supply Chain Act and the European Green Deal. Tell me a bit about how you see that playing out and what impact that's going to have on the EMS industry.
Yeah, when this German Supply Chain Act was released in early this year, it was clear that this will be a legally binding thing from the 1st of January 2023 onwards. Most people thought, okay, we as a company, not every company will be affected in the first place, only the big ones with 3,000 employees and more, but the smaller ones will follow. And most people thought, okay, we just need to make sure that in our supply chain, there is no child labor involved, there is no bribery involved, and these kind of things. That requires some work for us to do, but we will manage that. But if you look at the whole thing, it's more than just proving there is no child labor involved or there is no bribery involved, because it's also going, especially when you look at the European Green Deal Act, that goes in the direction, okay, from where do you source the energy for your plants? Okay, is that renewable energy? Is that green energy? What is your efforts internally to run a paperless office? Okay, reduce printing of papers, digitalize workflows, these kind of things. And then the next step, of course, will be what is your carbon dioxide footprint of your products? And this is not very easy to calculate. You can calculate the carbon dioxide footprint of a factory pretty easy, or with some efforts. But then break that down on a product, that's not so easy. You can do that by just applying a key, saying, okay, we have 100 active products, and these products require different manufacturing steps and have a different power consumption, have a different air pressure consumption, wastewater producing. And then you apply a key and break that down to the product. But this will always only be a guesstimate, okay?
Yeah.
A guess estimate. We need software solutions that will enable the companies to calculate the CO2 footprint of the product when it's being produced, just by calculating the CO2 footprint of the process and all the materials that go into the product. That is something that we need, and that's a big thing to do.
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
Yeah, and I think most companies don't even see that challenge at the moment.
No. So that's going to be a big awakening, and I think when you look at that, I think it's fascinating to see how we can look at life cycle analysis from that point of view, how we can look at supply chain analysis, and how we can say, well, if this supply chain is changed somewhat, then that might impact the carbon, the carbon footprint of a specific product, and that, along with the logistics issues and supply chain shortages that we talked about. I wonder if that plays into the need for shorter supply chains, for supply chains that are much more in region for region, that are much more what we had decades and decades ago before we pursued low-cost labor around the world.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that will be a trend for the next 10 years or so. Shorten supply chains, make supply chains more local, and therefore more resilient against. I mean, we just talked about the Suez Canal thing. If my supply chain of a German factory is in Poland or in the Czech Republic, it doesn't matter whether there is a ship got stuck in the Suez Canal.
Absolutely, and if one road gets blocked or another, a tunnel gets blocked, there's another way around it. It's not, we don't have these bottlenecks of of risk. Yeah. So I think I think that's interesting, and I think shorter supply chains could be a great boon for sustainability as well. So there's all kinds of benefits there, and it does mean a renaissance in terms of manufacturing in places where there is a high demand. So a big opportunity for Western Europe, a big opportunity for North America. And interestingly, when I talk to CEOs of companies that have manufacturing footprints in China, and I say, are you being pushed away from China? And they're saying, hey, to be honest, a lot of our Chinese manufacturing is now going to Chinese OEMs and going to, globally OEMs that want stuff shipped into China. So we're already doing region for region in China, even as a European or North American company. So it's fascinating to see how those supply chains are changing. The last one that you mentioned, you are the only person of 28 entries so far that mentioned, and it's one that just stood out to me and made me think both wow and oh my goodness, what are we going to do about this? And that's cybercrime as a service. And cybercrime generally is a real threat to businesses, and particularly businesses that are managing supply chains for other people. Tell me where you see that.
Yeah. So the reason why I brought that point up is because nobody talks about it. But if you look at the World Economic Forum's last risk report of 2021, it's on the top right side of the landscape of global risks to companies and to supply chains. And so I digged a little bit into that one, also because I prepared for my university lecturing for that subject. And I found a number of really, really threatening details, and read some reports also from the German Federal Crime Police Office about cyber threats in 2021 or 2020. The biggest problem is ransomware attacks on companies, mid-sized companies who don't have that really high sophisticated IT security. And they are just vulnerable for these kind of things. And the point here is, it doesn't need to have technical experts anymore to run these attacks. You and I, we could do that. I mean, if we would have a criminal energy, it's so easy. I don't want to lay out how it's going to work, because I don't want to give anyone a recipe here. But you can buy cyber attacks as a service from organized crime companies. Organized crime, meanwhile, acts like industry companies. They have an organization, they have a CEO, they have a COO, they have CTOs, and they just sell their services just in this different universe, in this criminal universe. But getting from the legal universe into the criminal universe is simple. It's easy. Everybody can do that. I mean, yeah, as I said, if you and I, if we would have a criminal energy here, we could.
Yeah, it's alarming, isn't it? And people have got to be, people have got to be aware of it and have got to be prepared for it. And, we talk a lot about the outsourcing of industry, but the outsourcing of crime is, is absolutely alarming. I would say to anybody, keep an eye on what Jürgen Thurner is writing and saying, because he's spotting stuff that a lot of us aren't aware of. So keep doing that, keep informing us, Jürgen. And again, thank you so much for your participation in What's the Scoop, and all the best for the holidays and for the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. My pleasure. Always my pleasure talking to you. And also same for you. Have a very good 2022.